when we learn how to provide the support for the body, when we learn how to address these biology aspects of how trauma has affected that, then it allows that mind to do what it does best and reframe and not be fighting the body and its stories in the process.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am honored to have a very special guest, Dr. Aimie Apigian. She is the leading medical expert on how life experiences get stored in the body and accelerating the trauma healing journey through her signature model and methodology called the Biology of Trauma. Dr. Aimie is a double board-certified physician, boarded in both preventative and addiction medicine with a master's in biochemistry and a master's in public health. She's a leader, speaker, and founder of Trauma Healing Accelerated, where she not only continues to lead individuals in their own healing journey, but trains professionals around the world to do the same. She has had over 200,000 attendees for her Biology of Trauma Summit, and she is just doing incredible work. She has people coming to her that have tried everything with regards to their health and maybe are starting to realize that, hey, maybe it's something else here. And so, Dr. Aimie, I'm so excited for this. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, and thank you for what you do in the world, Talora. Like I just seeing the energy and the investment that you're making into helping people. Thank you for how you show up in the world.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Well, let's get started with a little bit of a background of how you got involved and really got started in this work, because it looks like you have a lot of traditional training in medicine, and it looks like a lot of the stuff you're doing now is not traditional medicine type of stuff.
This was not the path that I expected, for sure. And when I first went into medical school, I was on what I thought was a very traditional path. And in fact, coming out of medical school, by that point, I had already adopted, and that's really kind of the first thing that really made my life go in a different direction. But I still was going into a general surgery residency. I still had my eyes focused on what I thought would be a very typical doctor type of career. And when I was in medical school, and actually have to back up, I was just finishing my master's in biochemistry. And then I was jumping back into third year of medical school. This was in Southern California. And I had a few months of period between ending that master's and jumping back into medical school. And so at that time I said, well, I don't know, let me become a foster parent. And I jumped through all of those hoops. My goodness, are there a lot of hoops. And finally, by the time I was actually ready and had done everything to my house that they require you to do for your house, I was already back in third year of medical school rotations. In fact, it was internal medicine rotation. And that's when I got the call from the social worker. We have this boy. He's 4 years old. His name is Miguel. This is his history. And this is why we want to put him with you and why we think that you are the perfect placement for him. And that decision ultimately changed everything, because once Miguel was in my home, he got into my heart. And I could see the path that he was on for his life trajectory if I did not adopt him. And being single, being in medical school, I knew that I was not the best choice for him. Anybody could see that. I could see that. I was not going to be able to be there for everything that he needed, right? Like he needed stability. He needed so many things that I was not going to be able to provide. But even though I was not the best choice, I could see that I was his best chance. And so with that, I did decide to adopt. And I had Miguel for 6 years, but that process completely changed my life. And ultimately, what I started to see were all of these trauma and attachment issues in my patients. So it's like Miguel opened my eyes to really what's going on underneath the surface. And it took me to a deeper level than what I was even being taught in medical school and in residency. And I saw, and I was hearing my patients say things that without that experience with Miguel, it would not have meant anything to me. Except now I could see that, wait a second, these emotional factors, if you will, are actually driving their health, their physical health, their disease, their symptoms. And it started cluing me into the fact that if I really, really want to help people, I've got to find a way to help them address this trauma that's become stored in their body in a way that I did not see them being able to do with things like your traditional therapy. It wasn't reaching the cellular level that I could see was being affected, because I'm the physician and I'm seeing their labs, I'm seeing their symptoms, I'm seeing their lack of progress or their flare-ups. And so it was out of that I moved into working with stored trauma in the body and really bringing in the biology piece, since trauma has changed our biology down to the cellular level. And we've got to bring that in as part of the trauma healing journey and not just focus on the emotional or the psychological aspects.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I know I am thinking, how do I know if I have stored trauma in my body? Right? How do people know?
Right? Yeah. Like, yeah. How do I? I don't know. Like, yeah, that's a great question. And when I talk with a lot of people, Talor, I would say that once we really get talking, right? Like once we feel safe enough to really share with each other what's going on, they know that they've had life experiences that they have not resolved yet. And in fact, I was talking with a businesswoman. She's high functioning. She's a multi-million-dollar business owner in Georgia. And we're at this event together. We're meeting for the very first time. And our mutual friend introduces us, and she shares with her friend what I do. And she says, "Oh, yeah, I probably need you. But I'm also probably not ready." And she's in her 50s. And then what she said to me was, if I were to be honest with you, I keep my trauma well hidden and well protected. And I think that's so many people. And I said, yeah, I'm not surprised. How much energy do you think it takes to keep that trauma stored, hidden, and well protected? And she looked at me with this surprise in her face, like she'd never thought of it. She'd never thought of the cost that comes to carrying our life experiences and not having been able to resolve them. And she actually couldn't give me an answer. So I asked her another question. I said, all right. If you didn't need to keep that trauma well hidden and protected, and instead had all that energy to put into something else, what would you do? And you know what she told me? She said, I'd be unstoppable.
Wow.
And yet, from the world's perspective, she's already unstoppable. I mean, just running a multi-million-dollar business, having formed and running a multi-million-dollar business. And she's saying that she would be unstoppable. And so when we look at, well, do I have stored trauma? Some of us can look back at our life experiences and just know that, yeah, like I've kind of just moved on from that. But I can honestly say that I haven't fully grieved that I haven't fully resolved that. I still feel like there's a part of me that's back there and got stuck there. And that's what takes up a lot of energy. And so then we start to see, well, those experiences that we didn't fully resolve, those actually become what changes our biology. And so we can look at, well, then how would you know that you have stored trauma? It actually shows up on all levels of a person. Because it's at the deepest level, it shows up in all the upper levels. And so, it's kind of like a tree that grows, and if you cut it and you look at the growth lines, wherever there was a drought, wherever there was any kind of danger, it shows that on the tree rings, and it's going to show up in every single ring thereafter, because we're building on that foundation. So wherever trauma got stored into our nervous system, everything on top of that is going to reflect that in some way. So we look at our thoughts. Well, actually above that would be like our behaviors and our actions, right? Do we have triggers? Do we have coping mechanisms that we use to not feel things or to feel a certain way, to not feel a certain way? Whether that's food, exercise, work, it's just our unconscious way of managing emotions becomes coping mechanisms when those emotions are tied to trauma. So we can look, do we think that we might have any coping mechanisms, even unconscious ones? And then we can look at our thoughts. So it will show up in our thoughts as well, being thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm no good. Like any self-judgmental thoughts like that are always a reflection of, there's some stored trauma beneath that. If you dig deep enough in that well, you're going to tap into the trauma. And so then underneath thoughts would be the actual emotions and the body sensations, right? And so when you're around people, places, or things, do you just get that twist in your gut? And it just reminds you of something, some person, some event in the past. And it's your body remembering that. And so we have all these body sensations. Even chronic pain is a way that the body is just remembering an old event that felt unsafe that has not been resolved. So we look at body sensations, bracing patterns, muscle tension, neck pain, back pain, all kinds of body sensations. And then once we dig deeper underneath that, we see the biology. And that's where we see that really trauma drives chronic health conditions. And chronic health conditions are what keep the body stuck in that trauma place. I call it the trauma physiology, trauma biology. And so it keeps it stuck. And so now we're in this vicious cycle where
Yeah, that's great stuff. Sounds like everyone has stored trauma to some extent. Yeah, yeah, to some extent. I guess I'm curious. So, I mean, it's interesting with your son that you adopted, and that's something I've actually been thinking. Like, wouldn't it be great to, have be a parent to a foster child, and adopt someone who's really in need. But then I actually do think about, and my wife has mentioned the same thing. Well, what about the traumas that they may have had, and how what if we can't help them with that? And what if So I'm just curious about your journey with your son. Have you been able to address or kind of work with him on certain things now that you have become more aware of them?
Oh, so this is our story. So, I mean, Miguel was how I came to know and understand trauma. I did not know this stuff before.
Mm-hmm.
If I had known this before, things would have been very different to Lore. I mean, 180 degrees different. Not knowing this stuff ahead of time really set me back in being able to even start the right way with him. If I were to take on another child now, foster or adopt, I would be able to do things completely different in a way that honors and knows how to work with that trauma from the get-go. And here's what happens with everyone. But we're talking about kids right now. But this happens with everyone, is that the nervous system, its job is to detect very, very quickly whether a person is safe or a danger. And thankfully, it is very quick at doing that, or else we'd be in a lot more trouble if our nervous system were not able to quickly judge, is this a safe person or do I need to fight or run away? And yet when a child comes in having had that much trauma, they've been displaced from the only home, the only parent, even if they're bad, right? Bad in quotations. that's all that they know. And so they are just in this massive place of instability at that time. And I thought that I knew what foster children and adopted children need, and I was completely wrong. Yes, they need a sense of safety, but my understanding at that time of what would provide safety was completely different than what actually provides a sense of safety. And we're talking about a felt sense of safety, something that happens within 3 seconds of seeing somebody and being able to make a judgment that fast. And so I started wrong, which means that his nervous system from the beginning, his first impression of me was, she's not strong enough for me. She can't handle my trauma. She can't handle my stuff. My emotions are bigger than she is. So either I've got to hide that stuff and not show her, or I need to, or I can be more powerful than she is. And I get to run the ship, and I get to still be in control of my life. And so not knowing that, it made it a lot harder then to then add in the pieces that as I was learning of what would help him, because I had to overcome that first impression that he had of, she's not strong enough for my trauma. So now that I work with people, that's why I'm so passionate about teaching people this stuff, so that those who are parenting or considering foster and adopting, then they know how to even start off on the right foot, because when we do that, then it doesn't take us as long to help them with their trauma. But if we start off with that first impression of, she's clearly not strong enough for my trauma, then it took 6 long years for me to figure out all the pieces that Miguel needed. And I can tell you that it didn't need to take that long. It did not need to take that long. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You work with so many people now, kind of shifting to adults now more. Over 200,000 people attended your summits. Why, how are these people finding out about you, or what kind of conditions or reasons, that they're realizing other things don't work and they're coming to you? What are some of the biggest things that people come to you for, that you're able to see such vast improvements by doing the work that you do?
Yeah. And honestly, Talor, I've even been impressed with the changes that can happen in people, because I remember back when I was starting my own journey, right? So first I helped Miguel and got him into a good place. And then shortly thereafter, and I mean shortly thereafter, my body was like, okay, it's our turn. And I got so sick, right? My body just gave in. And it was true that I had not been listening to my body. I had never listened to my body. That was part of how trauma showed up in my life. And I was forced to listen to my body. And coming out of that, I did not know what was possible, right? Because at this point, I had not only worked with Miguel, but I had worked with about 100 other families who had adopted or fostered, and taught them what I had learned about the healing attachment trauma specifically, and working with kids. And I had gotten used to working with a kid's nervous system. And they're so much younger, right? We can get so much work done because their nervous system doesn't have decades of doing the same thing the same way. And so all of a sudden, when now it was me, Talor, I have to admit, I was like, I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. I don't even know if I can get better. I don't know if this is just how it's going to be the rest of my life. And I just have to accept this. I have to accept the fact that I've got an autoimmune condition developing. I just have to accept the fact that I am on 2 mood medications and antidepressants. And I have to just accept the fact that I've got these health issues that are developing. And so that became my focus at that point, was, all right, how do I work with an adult nervous system that's been carrying trauma for decades, that it's now become health issues? Is it possible to even have improvements, and to, I want to say, kind of reverse the health issues that have been driven by the trauma. And as I was starting that journey, again, like it's taken me many years of self-experimenting and going to different trainings and then trying stuff on myself and learning this piece. And that's why I teach what I've learned. But the same thing, when people come to me, then they're often, not all of them, but often are already dealing with some chronic health issue. And I don't care what chronic health issue you have, all chronic health issues are driven by the physiology that our body is in. And if our physiology is one of health and safety, we are headed towards health and safety. But for so many people, we've accumulated trauma over our lifetime, right? Just one was not enough. Let's have another trauma. Let's have another trauma. Let's have another trauma. So we've accumulated trauma as we've gone through life. And eventually it's going to show up in our biology, in our health. It's already happening on the cellular level. It just hasn't reached to the surface yet. The actual symptoms is just the surface level. It's already been going on for a long time before it reaches the surface. And so many people have an autoimmune either condition or an autoimmune process, meaning they're on the path towards having an autoimmune condition. Many of them have some inflammation-based condition, whether that's gut inflammation and all kinds of digestive health issues, brain inflammation and brain fog and fatigue and decision fatigue and sensitivity to lights and reactivity of their nervous system. Many people have all of these issues in some degree, and that's just kind of how trauma shows up. Most people have sleep issues because in order to sleep well, we have to have our autonomic nervous system feeling like everything is safe, everything is good. I am safe to rest. And that's not how trauma informs the nervous system. The nervous system is informing us to be like, okay, that's fine. I'll let you close your eyes, but I still need to stay awake because I need to know about that sound and I need to know about that sound and I need to think about that problem. And, like, what is that person going to say in the morning? And so it's this constant like fight for survival that then we're just not able to rest. And so we have different degrees of the stored trauma. And that's partly what I teach people is how to show like how far you are down the road. When you're just kind of, I want to say in what I would consider one of the earlier stages of stored trauma, you're still mostly up in stress and anxiety, where you actually have a lot of energy and you're overreacting to everything. You're a hot mess. And that's the sympathetic state. But then the longer that you go on, the body can no longer keep up with that. And so it starts dipping down into a low energy state. And that's why so many people start to develop exhaustion, fatigue, burnout, because their body is no longer able to stay up in that high energy trauma state. And it's dropping down into the real, what I would consider the trauma response of the body of just shutting down in order to survive. And I would say most people, Talor, like most people are actually living in that place. And this is how they would know that. You ready for this? This is how they would know that. When they wake up in the morning, what is their first thought? I won't put you on the spot, Talor, so I'll do my confession that when I learned these 3 different states of my nervous system, I realized that my first thought in the morning was, I don't want it to be morning yet. I don't want to get up. I don't want to face my day. I'm already overwhelmed by my day that hasn't even started, but I'm already overwhelmed and I haven't even gotten out of bed. Right? And so in that place of overwhelm, the sensation of overwhelm is our body being in that trauma physiology. And so that would be another way that people can just easily recognize, oh, like I've got some stored trauma, is how often do you feel overwhelmed? Feeling stressed is different than feeling overwhelmed. Stress is like, okay, this is hard, but I think I got it. Overwhelm is that point where we say, I don't think I've got it. I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't think I have what it takes. And most people, Talor, like incredible to me. Most people are starting every day of their life that way, overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And then they're actually needing to create energy for themselves to start their day that they don't want to start, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why what is like the major market in the Western world? Coffee, right?
Right.
Oh, well, you're feeling overwhelmed? Not a problem. We have coffee waiting for you so that you can have that energy to get your day going when you really just want to stay in bed and pull the covers over your head and not talk to anybody. And so like these are the symptoms that people are coming with when they're coming into my program is yes, like many of them, most of them have some health issue, but now as they're going through the 6-week foundational journey that I have laid out for people, they're realizing, oh no, it's so much more. It is so much more than just my health issues. It's also how I talk to myself. It's how I isolate myself. It's how I emotionally eat. It's how I see the world. I'm always overwhelmed, I think. And I never even saw that as the way in which my body is expressing trauma. And so then just the further that a person lives with that trauma, the deeper and deeper they go into overwhelm, right? And so now we're actually having depression. And now maybe we're getting a diagnosis of chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or chronic pain, all of these conditions, diagnoses even, that are so closely connected with trauma. It is the equivalent of your body saying, help me, I have stored trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. I know many people listening might have trouble sleeping, might have adrenal fatigue or these kind of things. I'm curious now, shifting a little bit to resolving these issues, which I know is not going to be done in the remaining 15 minutes or so that we have here. Clearly, there's a lot of work, a lot of deep work that needs to be done here. By the way, a big tip, one thing that I did start to do was as soon as I wake up, and it took many years of personal development and growth and training to do this, but I now try to say like my affirmations, at least say them in my head or think of a positive things. I'm so happy and grateful for the health and happiness of my family and today's going to be a great day and this kind of, so I kind of, fake it till you make it kind of a thing until it becomes a little consistent after a while. And you can maybe train yourself a little bit on the first thought thing. But again, that's not resolving deep down trauma. So talking about, does someone have to actually figure out what the exact moment of trauma was in their past in order to heal it? Or can they just like do enough work on this and calm themselves where they can heal it without having to pinpoint, yes, it was that exact moment when I was 7 years old and my dad yelled at me or whatever?
That's a great question. And I think that that's one of the most common questions I get to Laura is some version of that, right? Like a person will say, I don't remember my past. Like that's how dissociated I am. That's how disconnected I am. And does that mean that I can't heal my trauma? Or another version would be like, do I have to dig and dig and dig and find that specific moment and then resolve that specific moment? And my answer to them is, well, if that's what you need to do to heal trauma, then start your list now, because it's going to be a really long list of very specific things that you either were said to you, were done to you, were not done for you, were not said to you. And then you're going to have to take that list into your therapist, and every single thing you're going to need to go down that list and just, put a check mark. Okay, I've resolved that one. I've resolved that one. That sounds like a very long, tedious process. I really hope that is not the path to healing. And it's not. And in fact, that's actually not helpful. It's really not helpful to go into the story at that stage. And I really want to emphasize that for people, because that's, I think, the what we've been taught, and that's actually not helpful. So one of the surprises that people get to experience when they come through my foundational journey, and again, I call it the foundational journey because it is laying the foundation to safely address stored trauma in the body. Addressing stored trauma in the body is like opening Pandora's box. We have no idea what's going to come out, but it could be really messy. It could be really messy. And we need to have tools. We need to have skills. We need to have the knowledge to understand what's coming out and what to do with it before we open up that box. If we don't lay our foundation, then we will get sicker. And that's what happens to most people, right? Like we go into a therapy session, we feel like, whoa, that was deep. That was emotional. I cried a ton. I released so much stuff. And then what happens? The next 3 days, you're so tired, you can barely get through your day. What happened? Oh, that was actually not helpful for your body. Because if we're getting sick, if we are having symptoms based on what we're doing, it's not helpful to the body. So we've got to lay our foundation first. And I call this the foundation of regulation. Regulation of our nervous system has to come before we're ready to process anything, or we're opening Pandora's box and asking for a big mess. And so the question is, well, then what do we do, right? Like where do we start? Do we need to actually remember the trauma event in order to heal it? And here's the difference, Talor. There's a difference between healing the event and working with our trauma response. And when we shift that focus from, no, we're not focusing on the trauma, we're focusing on the trauma response and how that response is happening in my present moment. Do we need to understand why it's happening in the present moment? No, we don't, actually. And the more that we try to figure out why, the more that we just leave our body and go into our brains where we love to analyze things. And analyzing things will not resolve your trauma. And so it's actually more helpful to learn how to work with the body and its responses. And then here's what happens. As people are going through their life, they have a trigger, but this time it's different. Why? Because now they understand what just happened in my body. And rather than turning the focus into, well, what did they do? What did they not do? What triggered me? They're like, nope, I have tools and I know how to work with this trauma response right here in this moment. I don't even need to call my therapist and make an appointment for next week. Like I need tools to work in this moment with my trauma response. And so shifting it to, no, we're not working with the trauma. We're working with how that trauma has been stored in your body and the trauma response that it continues to have every day as a result of that. And here's what is so cool about the body. When we give the body what it needs, it's able to process and resolve so much on its own. And so what will start to happen is people are going through the foundational journey, for example, they're learning these tools for regulation. I use a lot of somatic experiencing, somatic work, neuroaffective touch, as well as parts work in order to create that foundation of tools for regulation. And then as they're applying their tools, guess what happens? Like their body has more capacity and space, and they're starting to become more comfortable with the uncomfortable and have the tools to stay out of zones that are unmanageable, because we do not want to leave our window of tolerance, but we do want to grow that window of tolerance. And as we do that through building these skills, the body then has moments where all of a sudden someone will find themselves like with this big heat rising up in their body, and it's coming up from their belly and it's coming up their chest and their neck and their head. And they're like, what's going on? Or maybe they'll start having goosebumps, or maybe they'll start yawning, or maybe they'll start crying, or maybe they'll get a ton of, like watery eyes. And this is all forms of discharge. Maybe they'll start shaking. Their body will want to move in a certain way. And in that moment is when the body is resolving a past trauma. But the cool thing is that we don't even need to know the story. The body knows the story. We just need to be able to provide the body what it needs: the safety, the support, the container, the time, the space. And then it will be able to do so much on its own. But what most people do wrong is that they try to resolve trauma up in their head. And that is never the place where we will be able to resolve trauma. Trauma gets stored in the body, and we've got to learn how to work with the body and its trauma responses. And it's amazing what can happen. So even just, the foundational journey for me is 6 weeks long. But even in those first 3 weeks, people experience a 26% decrease in their daily physical pain. People have gotten off of their pain pills, their prescription pain pills that they've been on for decades during this journey because their nervous system is changing to a biology of safety. People are experiencing a 28% decrease in their GI issues, 28% decrease in their sleep issues, 30% decrease in fatigue. Like these are big things only in 3 weeks. And
That's
so
huge.
as I look at what's happening in people's physiology, I know that they're doing the work, and I know that they're providing their body what it has wanted for so long, which is that ability to understand what the body needs, be able to feel it, respond to it, and then get out of the way and let the body do its thing for being able to know when and how to actually process a trauma from the past. But that's not where we keep the focus.
It's so fascinating. It's so complex. There's so much to it. I do love what you said though. And a lot of it is like, I often have felt like, and again, if this works for many people, and I'm sure it does, then great. But like just dwelling on the past and the thing is like story, right? The key word that you use that I use also is story. We have a story about our past. A lot of the psychologists and people that I'm following and studying right now actually say that you can completely reframe and essentially change that story of your past, reframe the way you look at it, right? As you learn tools, like I'm sure people will learn through your programs, when you learn tools, when you learn how to be more and not react as much, right? Then you can actually maybe get a new light or something or a new insight and actually reframe the way you look at something in your past, where I think, is that kind of a part of your process as well in terms of like reframing the past?
You know what happens to Laura? It's amazing to me because as we focus on the body has a story, right? And even though our brain can try to convince the body, no, that didn't happen, or maybe let's change the meaning of what happened, the body still has a story. But here's what happens is that as we work with the body and we bring healing and resolution to that story, that it exactly happens the way you're describing, is that all of a sudden we now have the space to reframe that narrative. Until we work with the body, it's going to be mind against body, right? Mind against body, mind against body. But exactly what you're describing is what is possible when we really learn to work with the body, because it's bottom up, not top down, but bottom up. And so body informs mind. And that's why it's helpful to know, like, well, what is your first thought in the morning? The one that you're not controlling, right? Because we can control our thoughts, but what we don't control is the window into our body and the evidence of trauma. And so when we have these stories that the body has, being able to work with the body and just say, yes, I see you, I hear you, I'm here for you now. And let's change our present moment experience. When we can do that with our body, it naturally, you won't even have to force it. The natural reframing will come in our thoughts because our body has been able to resolve that and doesn't feel like it needs to hang on to that because that somehow, well, it did. I mean, it did define it in some way because it actually changed our biology. And so the mind can say, oh, well, that shouldn't be a big deal. And the body's like, well, you don't understand. It changed my immune system. It messed up my gut, right? Like, how can you deny those things? But when we learn how to provide the support for the body, when we learn how to address these biology aspects of how trauma has affected that, then it allows that mind to do what it does best and reframe and not be fighting the body and its stories in the process. Is that helpful?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. My mind doesn't like that answer because my mind is very good at playing mind games.
Yes, it is.
And winning in the game of the mind. I've done a lot of practice on that. So my mind doesn't like that answer. But yes,
but
it makes a lot of
does.
sense. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The body does. I know I want everyone to obviously learn more about your work and follow you. Real quick before we get to that though, is there a certain practice that maybe people listening now could do to maybe, that's not a mind trick. That's something like for the body, like, is it as simple as meditation or breathing, or is there kind of other types of practices, just kind of practical advice, and obviously afterwards I want you to share about your programs and where people can learn more.
Yeah, it's really hard to learn without being able to guide an exercise. However, if I had to pull something out where it's not an actual exercise that I can guide and explain and walk you through it, then I would say, one of the easiest things to do is to use weight, actually. Like that might be the one that I would go to. So I was actually going to suggest a different one first to you, which was to just grab a pillow and put a pillow in front of your stomach. When you're sitting down, whether you're just watching a movie or working, just grab a pillow and put it over your stomach. You will be amazed at the shift in your body that happens when you do that. And I wish that I could explain the whole science behind that, because I see your mind being like, but wait, I need to understand that. The other thing would be weight. And so I use a weighted neck scarf all the time. So I have it right here at my desk. I use a weighted neck scarf all the time because it activates those sensory nerves that will communicate safety and protection. I also sleep with a weighted blanket because that also informs my body of the same thing. And it helps kind of blur out all the other sensory information coming in that might keep me awake. And so weight can be a really helpful tool for the body and providing a felt sense of safety for the nervous system. So a pillow on your stomach and weight.
My mind has to know, when we have the pillow on our stomach, are we trying to feel or anything specifically, or what's kind of like, yeah.
I mean, you can, right? And if you take the foundational journey with me, that's one of the exercises that I teach. And I guide you through that process. But no, I mean, you don't have to do anything. You can just put a pillow over your stomach and it will do its job in the background. And you'll probably just notice how much more relaxed and focused you can be.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. Yes. Yes. And for anyone having a difficult conversation with someone, grab a pillow, or if you're a lady, grab your purse and just have your purse on your lap. You just want something over your belly in order for you to be able to feel like you can be authentic and share from your heart in a very difficult, hard conversation. Otherwise, you may shut down.
Amazing. I've never heard that before. That's fascinating. Well, Dr.
I'm glad
Aimie,
I could teach you something new.
Yeah, you taught me many things new. Yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate it. And where can people take the next step with you, learn more, and follow you?
They can find me at traumahealingaccelerated.com, and they can find me on YouTube. I have my channel there. That's under Dr. Aimie. They can find me on the social media platforms under Dr. Aimie. And I encourage them to go to my website, though, where I have a guide. And it kind of goes back to your question of how do I know I have stored trauma? I have a guide on my homepage. So traumahealingaccelerated.com. On the homepage, if they scroll down under resources, there's a guide there that's called Steps to Identify and Heal Trauma. There's a quiz in there that I've put where they can take that quiz and know, all right, do I have stored trauma? And maybe to what degree do I have stored trauma that I need to be taking this more seriously?
Amazing. That's a great tool. And for those listening, Dr. Aimie is spelled A-I-M-I-E, just to make sure people are spelling it correctly so they can find you on YouTube and everywhere else. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. This is really complex, deep work. And I feel like the more people that do this work, the better, the better of a world that we'll have. More people, less trauma, less diseases. This is just pure personal opinion, but I truly believe that so many diseases and illnesses do come from emotional trauma, things of that nature. So really, really appreciate you and the work that you're doing. And hope that we can do this again soon. Thank you so much.
Would love that, Talora. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.